Going back millennia, the Spring Festival is among the world's oldest celebrations. As the wheel of time moves forward, some traditions and culture of this festival have been lost. But the biggest challenges have taken place over the past decade. Nowadays, as Chinese people are gathering together for family reunions and the big dinner on Lunar New Year's Eve, they're also enjoying a banquet of high technology as it is reshaping the relationship between us and our culture. Just 10 years ago, adults in the family would put lucky money in a red envelope and give it to the children as a New Year gift. But nowadays, nobody's doing this anymore. Online payment systems such as WeChat Pay and Alipay have made the online red envelope a new ritual. In the past, people would spend several days making snacks and food, but now you can buy everything online. On New Year's Eve, family members used to gather around the table for dinner and watch a traditional Spring Festival gala show on TV, but now people tend to look at their mobile phones. Has technology actually made traditional festivals more or less interesting and enjoyable? Is it eroding our traditional culture? Welcome to a special edition of The Point with me, Li Xin, coming to you from Beijing. Joining me for the discussion today are Dr. Shen Jianguang, Vice President and Chief Economist of JD Digits, and Alan Babington Smith, President of the Royal Asiatic Society. Welcome, gentlemen, to the show. First of all, tell us a bit about the most exciting technologies we're observing in this season that are going to change the way we celebrate Spring Festival for 2019. Dr. Shen?
Yeah, I think artificial intelligence and also the Internet of Things, this already has changed the way Chinese people are raising pigs and produce porks.
As we are entering a year of the pig in the Chinese lunar calendar. So explain a little bit more about that, exactly how artificial intelligence is shaping the way we eat, we consume commodities.
Yeah, actually our company has developed a system, artificial intelligence system to raise pigs. For example, the pig face recognition system, and also an automatic feeding system, and automatic health checking system for the pigs.
Pig face recognition, you're saying every time a pig passes the gate, we'll be able to see the identity, but what's the meaning of that? How does that impact our life as consumers?
Oh, actually we know that porks are the most important meat for Chinese. Actually, the Chinese population is like 1/5 of the global total, but the pork production and consumption is more than half. Right? So this is the most important food for the Chinese celebration or this dinner table. So actually, but we also see that a lot of problems like the diseases. Right? Sometimes the pork price can surge, and people say, wow, the pork price inflation has driven Chinese actually monetary policy cycle because the impact on the Chinese inflation. So actually the system we are developing actually try to raise the quality of the pork, but also at the same time to reduce the cost. To stabilize the price cycle, and that actually can benefit a lot of farmers as well as consumers.
How developed is that technology? Are we the only one in China to have this kind of pig face recognition? Or tell us about the perspective globally.
Yeah, as far as I know, I think that's the first in the world. That's the invention by a Chinese company. That we already have been working with actually big farm for over a year already. So actually many companies are the farmers are signing up. So actually we are seeing tremendous growth. And actually after pig face recognition, we're actually developing cow face recognition.
Perfect.
Yes.
So are we going to have chicken face recognition, sheep and everything? Is that the goal eventually?
Exactly.
To make animal husbandry and agriculture so meticulously managed so that we actually really know where our food comes from and what has been fed to these animals?
Exactly. I think it potentially can revolutionize Chinese agricultural sector, because Chinese farmers actually have a much lower income than the urban people, and they work much harder. Actually, the automatic system, and we also robotics, with artificial intelligence, the purpose is to cut the cost of the production of these farmer products, but at the same time raise the quality, and also they can spend less time. For example, celebration of Chinese New Year. In the past, the farmers also have to tender all this, the pigs, animal farms, but now it can be replaced by robotic machineries and automatic artificial intelligence. We have this all this detectors to check if there anything urgent or anything abnormal happening. The farmers can get signals, and
it's
then
a revolution that's going on, right?
Exactly.
I mean, Alan, you have spent 18 years in China. Did you ever foresee that things will come to this stage?
No, not possibly. I'm not a futurist. I don't think I could possibly have imagined this. But just touching on the question of agriculture, in Europe and America, it's been much more focused on the cow. Where now there are automatic milking machines and feeding machines, and the cow will tell a central computer when it's feeling ill. But it's interesting that there is a slightly, perhaps, malign side to this, because how will the huge number in China of rice farmers then cope when the technology that's available really destroys their way of life? Small paddy fields of rice grain, one family.
Yeah, Dr. Shen, have you ever thought about that?
Yes. For example, I just give you an example like pork price, right? Can you imagine Chinese cost of pork is 2 times as more expensive than in the US?
Yeah, but in rice it's 5 times.
Yes. So this actually is the productivity issue, right? So actually if your traditional way, the Chinese farmers have very little income, they work very hard, but that's actually increased the gap between the urban and the rural areas. So this technology actually is trying to raise productivity. Of course, can change the way of these small farms doing hard work.
The big issue is employment, because the great industrial revolutions of the past happened when people moved out of agricultural labor into other labor.
And exactly.
What's the impact on China of that? I think it's perhaps a bigger issue than Tunisia, maybe.
I see a small discussions happening on this side of the studio, but let me try to come back and do my job. But it's really fascinating. You were talking about industrialization, you were talking about agriculture, and we're seeing this changing dynamic of Chinese demographics and accentuated by the advancement of technology. Alan, let me again ask you, how have you observed the impact of new high technology on the Chinese people's way of dealing with a traditional holiday?
The most obvious thing is that people can now book return tickets.
On the train?
Yeah, exactly. When I came to China, you couldn't do that. It was a nightmare for everybody, but now everybody can book return tickets online, so that's a huge improvement.
And also with the high-speed train.
High-speed trains make it much easier to travel, and as you say, there's very few places that are so remote you can't get food delivered from a restaurant on the back of a bike. I mean, the whole of that side of life has changed completely. And I think you mentioned the Chengyu being composed by an artificial intelligence. I think that's fascinating. I mean, wordsmith is used in the West in the same sort of way, and that's going to, I'm sure, change the way people think about things. And there's going to be some, I'm sure it's already happened, there's been some computerization of the old paper cuts. People now maybe have a light show on their house instead of an old paper cut.
Well, what I understood is that the traditional couplets you put on the sides of your door used to be written by a human being to express a kind of wish for the family for the new year, and now I understand there is new technology for robots to do that, and these robots will be able to communicate with their customers before they decide how to write and what to write. That's a fascinating idea. I mean, Dr. Shen, how do you look at this fascination, or almost a kind of obsession the Chinese people have with the latest, the newest, the thing that nobody ever thought about before?
Yeah, I think this is internet, business, e-commerce, started, right? So the China, if you look at mobile payment, China, the penetration rate is #1 in the world, right? So there's indeed, you can say in many cities in China you have a cashless society. You don't need the cash. Even I'm traveling in China, I use just mobile phone.
Yeah, I don't carry my wallet anymore.
And also the face recognition technology also used in the mobile phone, and this fingerprint, right? So it's make life so easy, right? So that actually is already changing a lot of things. But on the other hand, I think the fascination of Chinese people on this thing, for example, the face pick recognition or technology, because Chinese demographic development, as you mentioned, a very important change, because the Chinese working population is declining already for several years. So even the farmers, if you go to rural area, there is almost no
countryside
labor,
like people,
very less and less laborers. So that's actually the technology can help to fill the gap. Actually, there's a need. Actually, this is a very important market economy, right? So there is a need to develop this kind of technology to replace laborers and to raise productivity.
But how is that impacting the way how we celebrate traditional holidays like the Spring Festival? In the West, this is more or less like the Christmas Eve, right?
Absolutely.
This is as important, more important actually, even for the Chinese people. It should be a holiday where people gather around the table and chat and see each other once every year. Has that kind of atmosphere, that significance changed because of technology, Alan?
Well, certainly travel is easier than it used to be. So that has brought given people much easier opportunities to get together. But I don't know, when they sit round the jars, and are they all just looking at their mobile phones, or are they talking to each other? I think there is this curious aspect that social media has made people antisocial in a funny way.
What about in the West? In the UK, when people celebrate Christmas?
We're very old-fashioned still. We stick more or less to our old traditions, with a Christmas tree and Father Christmas coming down and so on.
So Christmas is still very special in a way?
Very much so, yes, absolutely. Even if you're not, I think one of the curious things is that there are many non-Christians in Britain, and they all celebrate Christmas, or they've converted it to a local festival for their own particular faith. It's become a very interesting festival, and technology, I don't think has changed it that much.
In the
Except
UK.
that everybody expects to get a new iPhone for Christmas. I suppose that's a big change, isn't it?
Dr. Shen, what's the picture here in China? Is Spring Festival still so special in terms of the human aspect of it? Although we have all the technology, as Alan said, on Christmas, on New Year's Eve, we might all be watching our phone. We might not go out into the market to buy pork anymore. We're ordering online. You're not leaving your home anymore. You're not having this experience of going on the brick and mortar store and having a coffee and tea with friends.
Sure.
Yeah.
I think still it's a very special season and a very special festival. People get together, family members. So in the past, we know there's several hurdles. Right? For example, traveling, as you mentioned, right? It's so difficult for so many millions of people, right? 1 billion people are moving around. So it's the transportation system and also the ticketing system process is so difficult for many people. And secondly, prepare the food, prepare the dinner in the past, always a big thing. I remember when I was small, helping parents to prepare all the food, for several days before we can have the big dinner, right? So nowadays, all these things get so smooth. Like you can book ticket on internet. Before, I remember I see the TV program. So many people are waiting in the railway station to queuing for the ticket. Right? Nowadays, you can just book online, and you go there and you just use your ID card. Right? Automatically got the ticket. And you
human face recognition.
Exactly. You don't even.
All right. We have been talking about how technology has shaped our way of celebrating the most important traditional family holiday, and we're going to take a very short break. We'll be back right after this to talk about what more has to be done so that we can appreciate this holiday better. Stay with us. Welcome back to this edition of The Point with me, Li Shen, and my guests are Dr. Shen Jianguang, Vice President and Chief Economist of JD Digits, and Alan Babington Smith, President of the Royal Asiatic Society. So let's talk about what new scenarios we are having for that most important day of the year for the Chinese family. For this Spring Festival, CCTV, the national television of China, organized a very special broadcast from the Beijing studio and also from a studio in Shenzhen in southern China, and they used the highest level of communication technology available, the 5G that everybody is talking about, to transmit 4K technology, 4K images to Beijing and then to audiences around the world. What kind of new experience is being enabled by such high technology, Dr. Shen? Can you imagine? And what has to be happen? What do we as normal users, end users, need to have in order to experience this kind of change?
Yeah, actually, the good technology make a process easier. So for consumers, it should make it easier and faster and less disruption. So people tend not to recognize the fundamental change happening, but for companies, right, who providing this technology, there's huge, competition there. Right? So for China, for example, you mentioned 5G. So this quick face recognition process. Actually, we are using the same, the Internet of Things. So all this, process will be monitored by in the central location, like a control center, right?
Okay.
So there's no need for individual farmers to every time to monitor the conditions.
What do the farmers have to equip themselves with in order to experience that kind of technological change?
Of course, that will probably need to upgrade their knowledge. So they don't need to clean up the field, and they don't need to do all the hard labors, but they need to really know how to monitor, how to understand the signals, to monitor the process, actually to control the robots, right, who is doing the tough job.
Absolutely, that's fascinating. Well, let's come to this keyword of control, right? When you have all the cameras to monitor the faces of the pigs, and then we have the cameras to recognize the faces of passengers, 1 billion traveled during the holiday period of time. Absolutely incredible to think of from many Western perspectives, many foreign perspectives. And yet, what kind of price are we paying for that? I know the data is supposed to be very secure, used for good purposes, but are we paying a very high price in terms of our privacy as well, Dr. Shen?
Yeah, that's actually for society to discuss the privacy issue versus technological progress. So actually, Europe have the most strict data protection laws, but also I recognize that there is almost no good unicorn company from Europe these days, right? If you think about artificial intelligence company, good innovative company, mostly coming from China or USA these days, right?
Where the data protection laws are relatively lax.
Less strict. But of course, I think this is already on the agenda. So people discuss what's the trade-off. So how much this kind of privacy you want to trade off for the advance income, technical progress. So I think that's a very, very important question. Even the US and Europe, they have different opinions, different laws regarding this data protection and also development of these innovative companies.
Indeed, I find that fascinating because it's a trade-off, as you say. In the past we have to prepare all these red envelopes, put money in there, and nobody knows how much you're getting, how much you're giving to. But then with the WeChat payment system, you can send out so many more red envelopes, but all of the data is being recorded and secured, analyzed by a company. Alan, how do you look at that?
Well, I think there are two sorts of privacy. From the Western and I dare say American perspective too, there is privacy amongst individual members of societies and companies. The companies cannot abuse your data or sell it to other people. But I think, I have to say this, a greater concern is privacy from the government, and how the government uses all the data that it has. And I mean, everybody traveling on these wonderful fast trains on Junji will have an announcement saying, behave well, watch out for your credit score.
Well,
so, you know, and so I mean that's a different.
That's the question many people are asking.
Yes.
Yeah, Dr. Shen.
True. You know, I've been traveling quite around the world, right? I went to, for example, Japan in the past. They have very strict privacy law. Japanese people are very sensitive to privacy issue. So that's why in Tokyo you see all the taxi drivers, right? There's no like apps. So you don't
exchange.
You don't apps in the mobile phones. You don't
so
order
none
taxi.
of your data is being stored by, or monitored
exactly.
by anybody.
But then you cannot really order taxi from your mobile phones. You have to
price you pay.
Yeah, exactly. So there's also lines of taxis lining up outside the hotel. For taxi drivers, it's also tough for them. They cannot just get business from their mobile phones, right? So, but that's actually they are also reflecting on this. So if the too strict law to protect the privacy, then you don't get some services, right? And you don't have the convenience. So that's why in Japan they are changing also. So the mobile payment system has been introduced, right? So a lot of mega banks in Japan say, oh, we want to also reduce the use of cash, because use cash you can protect your privacy. No one knows where you spend the money, right?
But you can also have black money. You can also have a whole set of other questions.
Exactly. So always it's a very complicated issue. You have to look at it from different angles to get. So China chose to have quite a liberal attitude, at least in the past and until now. So okay, let's try see what kind of danger or risk it can entail to the society. Then we probably think about the laws to protect.
Is that a thing with Chinese characteristics, really? I mean, the Chinese are much more adventurous. We are much more excited about new technology, and sometimes we are really not aware of what we're going into. But with that kind of adventurousness, we created some of the biggest companies in the world. And also we damaged our economy in terms of pollution. For instance, we go full speed, and then when we stop and look around and see the smog and everything, is that something that's really quite Chinese, but also how we have come so far so fast.
So this actually exactly the Chinese economic model of feeding the stone when crossing the river, right? Normally, I remember in the Western world, normally people want to have a blueprint first.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
If you want to cross the river, you have to build a bridge first, right?
Exactly.
But in Chinese way, like a
let's
reform,
cross
right?
the river,
First let's cross it, right? So
I think
that's actually
in that respect, I think that China is very like the United States 150 years ago. I mean, before 1900 in the States, everybody tried everything, and huge failures, huge successes, and of course the scale of China. It changes everything. But if you make a success of it, then you're noticed on a huge scale. I'm not sure. I mean, a lot of the technology that is used in WeChat, for example, which is the main thing, is not terribly advanced technology per se, but China had the guts to apply it, and on the scale of China,
that's right.
It's changing everybody's lives.
Yeah, so what does that say about the Chinese technology? I mean, it is not high technology. A lot of it is not, but it's just that we took the bits and pieces that are available and apply them into our daily lives.
Well, I think, but on the other hand, I mean, the latest Chinese space venture is the highest possible technology. I mean, to be able to broadcast a signal from the dark side of the moon is a staggering achievement. And what that's going to do for the lunar holiday, I don't quite know. Will they be celebrating? will that machine still be on the moon on Chunjie? Will it be celebrating Chunjie on the dark side of the moon? I mean, that's quite a thought, isn't it?
That's right.
Yeah,
I don't know what kind of signal.
The calendar.
Yes, exactly. I don't know what kind of signal they're going to be sending back on that machine on Chunjie.
See, you need to have the guts and the imagination to do the things that have never been tried before. On the other hand, we still have to be sober-minded. As you said, a lot of the technology we have today is not the top-notch technology. We just have the imagination and the guts to put them together and use them whatsoever. Is there a bubble in terms of technology in China, that we are really having this feast of high technology, but actually when we come down, we still have a lot of hard work to do to catch up in both in terms of hardware and software?
I'm not worried because as far as I know, I think that everywhere in this field there is fierce competition. So I think that's a very healthy situation because as long as you have a competition, and this bubble companies will fail in the last, but then the good one can emerge. So as long as there is a fair and a free market for companies to compete, which I'm seeing, it's fierce competition in the world. That's where you can stimulate the new companies to emerge. That's why actually explain what you said, and so many good applications can be used in China because the companies are actually under severe pressure to experiment, to develop.
Competition.
That's right.
I agree, Dr. Chen, up to a point. But I mean, obviously, one of the new technologies coming through for the world is 5G, and the market in China is regulated by the players, which is rather different from
not
what
by
it is
the regulator.
Exactly, not by the regulator.
No,
So
I disagree because the companies, they have to compete globally.
Yes.
Even though internally there's this regulation, but this company have to survive global markets.
They have,
that's
they have
why
a different
exactly.
Okay.
And I think that is where China, I think, has got the lead in 5G. There's no question.
Hopefully.
Yeah.
All right, we really have to leave it there. So interesting, such an interesting conversation, but happy Lunar Chinese New Year.
Thank you.
So many thanks to my guests, Dr. Shen Jianguang, Vice President and Chief Economist of JD Digits, and Alan Babington Smith, President of the Royal Asiatic Society. And with that, we come to the end of this special edition of The Point with me, Liu Xin. As always, you can follow me on Facebook and Twitter using the handle The Point with LX. Download the application called CGTN to watch the show on your mobile devices, or go to YouTube and look for CGTN The Point. Thanks for watching. You've got The Point, and happy Chinese New Year.